We were always taught in the military for patrols, and it holds true for cybersecurity. Often, you are looking for the presence of the abnormal or the absence of the normal. And if one or two of those are tweaking your spidey senses, then something is wrong. I was involved in signals intelligence, where we put headphones on and we listened into press to talk radios, mobile phone conversations, we translated emails and text messages.
Today I'm with Shaun Ferris, the cybersecurity trainer. Hi, Shaun. Nice to meet you.
Nice to re-meet you.
Re-meet you or re-e-meet you because we're online.
E-meet, yes. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's always my pleasure, and again, it's always a pleasure to see you, at least online. So it's you went to tech, not from like the school ages, or you haven't graduated from uni with the I know engineering degree and that kind of stuff. You had a different career path, and it's also interesting because the majority of folks who served in military around the world, if they go to tech, they end up in cybersecurity. So, which is also an interesting thing. I would like to hear from you how you ended up in tech and how what you were doing in military. Was it actually related to tech, or it was a completely different field?
Yeah, so I mean, my journey to tech was very meandering, much like most of my stories when I'm delivering training. I joined the UK Royal Air Force at 18. Ironically, I got a D in GCSE IT. I hated courseware and or coursework, and couldn't apply myself, or didn't motivate myself enough to do coursework. I started an A level in computing and dropped out because I really struggled with it, because I couldn't motivate myself. I think because I'd always wanted to join the Air Force, and I knew from a young age that yes, my favorite topics of computers and languages were going to be used, and I pretty much was guaranteed to join the Air Force, that I didn't need to worry too much about A level. So that then had a knock on effect that I wasn't fussed about attending university. When I joined the Air Force, I joined as a military linguist. I went almost back to school, studied Arabic, and that was my career for 7 years. I was involved in signals intelligence, where we put headphones on and we listened into press to talk radios, mobile phone conversations, we translated emails and text messages, and produced intelligence reports. And for the most part, that was very interesting. But I didn't want to stay in a room where I had headphones on, staring at a screen, being on my own for. Hang on a minute. It was like working from home.
I think that's pretty much a story, a life story since COVID, right? Headphones, staring at the screen, all alone. I would like to ask you how long it took you to learn the Arabic language.
There's in the military. There's two essential levels that you get to. When I joined, obviously, I knew nothing. We go through an assessment when we go to join the Air Force, because the Air Force is different to the other services. Essentially, you join to do a particular trade. Now, my trade was going to be an intelligence analyst with a voice specialization. So I had to be fully assessed and fully security cleared before I joined. So, as part of that assessment, they assess your ability to understand new languages and retain that information. So they give you all sorts of different words, different symbols, etc., and get you to regurgitate them later on in the day and the following day, just to see how quickly you can retain that information. Now, I scored highly enough on that that they wanted me to do Arabic, which was frustrating at the time because in my naivety, as I think I was 17, 18, um, I'd done German and French at college, and I thought, well, the main languages in the military is likely to be Russian. And in my naivety, I thought, well, Russian's similar to German, isn't it? Sure, that'd be fine. Oh, how stupid I was. But anyway, so they offered me Arabic, and I obviously took it. And then when I joined, got through basic training, which was 7 weeks of about 5 weeks of learning how to iron and polish, and 1 week of green activity, so running around playing soldiers. And then the final week was learning how to march for your pass out parade. That was effectively how the first time basic training was. After that, I got posted to the Defence Intelligence School of Communications down in Chicksands, which is near Bedford. And it was like going back to school. We were there 8 till 5, 8 till 4, virtually every day. And it was, you're going to learn the Arabic language. We're going to learn from scratch. You're going to learn like you are school kids. So that whole course is 18 months. The first year of that is primarily where you're learning the language. So it was a year's course essentially of understanding Arabic from scratch. Excuse me. You then move up to the secure building and you start focusing in on specific, primarily military language styles, and understanding more about the job that we're going to be doing when we got posted on. So I'd say it was about a year before I could converse in Arabic. With the military, they focus in. So within NATO, there's a standard scale for languages, with 0 being never touched it and 5 being native. The course I went on took us up to level 4 on reading and listening, and only level 3 on speaking and writing. The general process is you attend that course, you go to your first posting, and then after that first posting, depending on your aptitude, you will then go to a little place called Beaconsfield to take that language even further. So you get 4s across the board, and you could then do live translation as applicable. So
Okay, so it's well, it's kind of a short period to actually master it, I'd say. But you do 8 to 5, so it's pretty much a full day. Is Had that changed your way of learning? So are you learning right now the same way? So you do like the full on dedication, let's say for a month to fully go and learn something from 8 to 5, or you do it mostly in a smaller batches, and what's your learning process?
my learning process, I'm very much a learn and dump sort of guy. I'll learn what I need to know for whatever role or training course, etc., and then generally I'll forget it because I'm awful. Um, how I tend to learn, um, I I love different ways of learning. I love. I'm not one of these that likes slide decks. I've fully admitted that in pretty much all of my courses, and I need to practice. So I love a course that you can do hands on. So things like um, certifications, for example, they're um, very static to me because you're essentially finding the information out and retaining the information. So, for example, when I did SSCP and CISP, a lot of it was intense learning. I bought some exam guides and just practiced and practiced. Luckily, with my foundation in information security, a lot of the topics I do understand. And because I've taught courses like digital encryption, I understand that process. So a lot of those security based topics are already in my head. And we had a great phrase when we were learning Arabic. "Taqrir yu'allim al-himar," which is repetition teaches the donkey. And the more you do something, obviously, the better you get at it. So, which is why a lot of my courses I will understand for the period of time that I'm delivering them. But if I'm out of practice, yeah, forget about it.
Makes a lot of sense.
But the difference was obviously because it was a secret building. There were no windows. It was all air conditioned, and so I actually volunteered to um, do a human intelligence tour, a deployment to Basra in Iraq. In the back end of 2006. So I actually spent Christmas in Basra, which is a delightful part of the world. I wouldn't go there for winter if you like skiing because it's very flat. It was also very, very loud, as I'm sure you can imagine. We were getting hit by rockets and mortars pretty much every day, sometimes multiple times a day. So it was an experience. Um, just before I deployed, I had actually made the decision that I wanted to change my career tack and get back to almost what I considered my first love, which was weirdly computers. Because uh, having grown up in the 80s, we didn't have a computer to start with. My stepfather was a university lecturer, so he ended up bringing one back one day, and I kind of started playing about with it and just really enjoyed what I could do with it until the point where I must have read something somewhere that this was a way to free up some space, and I opened a command prompt and typed in format C colon and pressed enter. And in those days, there weren't the safeguards that there are in the operating systems today. So when the screen went black, I started to panic. And then I saw stars because my stepfather gave me a whack round the back of the head. But it did get me thinking, why why was I allowed to do that, and B, why didn't I know enough to stop myself doing that? And that kind of prompted my love hate relationship with technology that I still have to this day. So I kind of went back to that in the Air Force after I asked whilst I was in military intelligence, can I transfer trades? And they said no. In fact, the advice was it would be easier if you left and rejoined. So I did. I left the Air Force 2008. I started a university degree back here in Norwich in computer science as a mature student, and got on quite well with the first year. I think I was on target for a first, but due to other life situations, I dropped out halfway through the second year because um, I had other stuff going on, and I I didn't feel ready to be a civilian at that point. And I always had in the back of my mind, if this falls through, I can always rejoin the military. So I did. I applied to rejoin the Air Force, this time as a communications technician. So one step closer to that dream of working with tech. And this time I went through basic training again, which is so much easier second time round, let me tell you. I then went to trade training, which was a year's worth of training over computers, networks, radio, radar, everything, every bit of tech in the military we potentially would have to work on at some point in our career. So we had to have that grounding. During that time, we had certifications such as CCNA, and it was the networking. And we had this lovely brief called cyber. There was this new buzz phrase in the military that was coming out. And I distinctly remember the brief because whenever you're going through training, especially with a large cohort, you have personalities in the cohort. And one of the personalities is the guy that always falls asleep during briefings. Luckily, that wasn't me. I generally paid attention. But this guy was sort of dozing half in and out. And the brief was on cyber and the joint cyber unit down in Corsham. And it was talking about hacking and how we can defend against it and how we can use that as offensive security as well. And we went to lunch straight after this brief, And the guy who'd been sort of dozing sort of woke up again and went, "Oh, I'll tell you what, lads, I can't wait to get into that ethnical hacking." And we just went, "No, oh, you can't say that." Um, so yeah, that piqued my interest in cyber and cybersecurity, and I thought, yep, that's where I want to sort of direct my career in the Air Force. Unfortunately, the Air Force deploys you where it needs you. So my first posting after training was a very remote radar head called Nita's Head, which is also ironically back in Norfolk, which I was trying to get away from. So I got posted to a radio and radar base, which was very reactive. We had scheduled maintenance of the ground to air radios, which still used and probably still use 1960s valve technology, which was hilarious. And we had a radar site that we had to monitor as well. So I engineered a role for myself where I would start looking at information security and then started building out my almost portfolio and practice whilst I was there. And then 2016 came along. I'd met my wife Laura, and always wanted to settle down in Norfolk anyway. But this expedited those plans ever so slightly. So 2016 was a big year. I was looking to leave the Air Force. Also got married that year, so quite an expensive year. And as part of leaving, what the military will do is pay up to 20 or 80% of a course that you want to do to try and ease that transition from military to civilian life. And one of the courses that was on the list was the Certified Ethical Hacker. And I thought, that's £3,000 at the time. That's quite a bit of money. If they're going to pay 80% of it, fantastic. I'll take them up on it. And the original plan was to take it with a view to joining the Joint Cyber Unit, but with leaving and during that leaving transition process, which takes a year, you think 3 months is long if you're a technical guy and you've got a 3 month notice period. You think that's long. Try a year's notice period. That's even that's a nightmare. Trying to keep motivated for that entire year is awful. But during that time, I was job hunting, and this one job came up that was a technical trainer or a cybersecurity trainer for a company here in the UK called QA, and it was to be a cybersecurity trainer for military and government agencies. And I thought, well, for starters, I think I can speak about computers and technology till the cows come home. I can bore people to death with it. But also, that would make a nice, easy transition from the military to the civilian world because it's almost a halfway house. So I applied for it. It also helped that being private sector, it effectively more than doubled my wage at the time. So that was a no brainer. The only downside was there was going to be a lot of travel involved. But at the time, we were still young. We didn't have kids. So it wasn't too bad to start with. But that's another story. Whilst I was at QA, I got a few more courses under my belt, and a few more certifications. SSCP was one. CISP, I did the training for, and then got certified later on with a later career. But effectively, my role was to aid in the delivery of a 3 month program for new security analysts. So these were postgraduates or new employees of 3 and 4 letter agencies here in the UK or for the military. And our remit was we generally take them from zero to hero. And in some cases, they would start with less than zero because they would take on humanities postgrads, people who had no interest or background in technology, but they'd been chosen for their logical and analytical skills, as you'd expect. Um, so in some cases, we had to teach the basics of networking to people who had no idea what a device was, no idea what a packet was or a segment. And I had a 2-week slot with this one cohort where I had to take them from zero to hero in networking to the point that they could open Wireshark, record something, and tell me what was going on. And at the end of the 2 weeks, I was done. I really was. But they'd hit all their learning objectives, and they even bought me a bottle of wine, which was fantastic. So I was doing that. I also helped co-found the CyberFirst Initiative. So QA were tasked by the National Cybersecurity Centre here in the UK to create a program to not indoctrinate, that's the wrong word, encourage teenagers to understand that cybersecurity is a massive part of any job role that they are likely to go into. Not just on the professional side, but on the personal side as well. So I helped co-found that and helped direct the movement of that. I built an entire day's course, pretty much by myself as well. CyberFirst Adventurers. I'm not sure if it's called that anymore, but it was all about trying to pique their interest, like mine was all those years ago. So trying to not appeal, but just to find something that would pique their interest, because we understood that not everyone's going to be the greatest programmer. Not everyone's going to want to analyze data, but there's going to be a job in cyber, or whatever role they go into, there is going to be some form of information security that they need to be aware of, even if they're a farmer, you know. So, and that was the whole point of that CyberFirst initiative, and that was a fantastic part of QA's job, and fantastic courses that I helped run and had a lot of fun doing that. Towards the end of QA, as I said, the travel got a bit much. I was back and forward to Cheltenham for obvious reasons, and other locations as well. And I just wasn't. I didn't have that home life or work life balance that I needed. Luckily, one of my colleagues at QA had just left and joined this small security vendor called TrendMicro, and he said they are very family oriented, and the boss that he was working for seems fantastic, even though he'd just joined, and he'd love me to come aboard. Um, and I said, sure, I'll go through the interview process. And I remember the interview process was two parts. It was a technical video, which wasn't overly technical, but I just went to pieces on. I was awful. For the most part, I perform well under pressure, as you'd expect from one in the military. Give me a car crash, give me a shooting, I'm absolutely fine. Put me in front of a camera and ask me about a networking model, I completely forgot. In fact, for my interview for QA, I actually got the layers mixed up, but somehow still got the job.
Probably the time is also ticking, right? So you need to explain like a few hours material and compress it into like 1 or 2 minutes.
Plus the additional pressure of it's an interview, your future could depend on it, sort of thing. So luckily at the time, I when I applied, I could have stayed at QA, but I was looking to move on anyway. So, but yeah, so I somehow got through this video interview, and I was invited down to London and to attend a physical interview. I presented on DNS of all topics, and I just did a few whiteboarding bits. Luckily, my colleague had prepped me a little bit just to say, here's what the interview process is. He also warned me that there was one trainer who, if he was the second interviewer, then be warned, because he would take you to the cleaners. Luckily, I didn't have him. I had another guy, and yeah, seemed to endear myself to the team, and they offered me the job, and I moved across to Trend and started delivering on endpoint protection. Um, I think the difference between Trend and what I was doing with QA was with QA I was a generalist. I delivered, as I say, a 3 month program, so I was delivering things about operating system fundamentals. We were talking about file tables and databases and the rest of it one week, and then the next week I'd be delivering ethical hacking, and we'd be actively attacking a box. Whereas with Trend, it was very much your focus is going to be one of the products, and you're going to know that product inside out, which is fine. And I moving from that was probably the hardest transition for me. Going from a generalist to a product specialist was very difficult. Um, I found it difficult initially because most of my training history up to that point had been you rely on slides and you kind of know the topic and it's hard and fast. Whereas as a product trainer, it is a very dry subject and you need to make it interesting. And the best will in the world, you can show all the slides, but everyone's going to fall asleep, including yourself. So I quickly learned that I need to understand that product. I need to understand the protection modules, and I need to speak to people wider than the training team to get that knowledge. So after a slightly stuttered start, I feel I did become quite a good product trainer for the protection product I was on. I think with my threat intelligence and threat investigation experience that we had in the military, that helped when endpoint detection and response became a massive part of the protection product, and teaching customers and trying to teach sellers how the product worked and what its limitations were so they didn't lie to customers just to make the sale. Um, that was invaluable, especially when Trend changed direction and said, now we've got this new platform that looks at extended detection and response. And it was a natural pivot for me because all it was we've got these detection response capabilities. We're now adding additional stuff to it. There was a lot of resistance internally. I remember one other trainer um, absolutely hating the new platform, and almost to the point that he would refuse to deliver training on it. Um, which was fine for me because I was happy to deliver it. Whilst this was going on, when I joined Trend, or just after I joined Trend, we fell pregnant with our first. So we had all that to deal with, and then shortly after, she was born in the October, and then a few months later, COVID hit, and so that was a whole different experience as well. I mean, as a training team, I think we naturally moved to virtual training. I think we'd done a couple anyway, so it was a lot easier for us to pivot to virtual training. But it was more everything else that went on in the world that threw us. And obviously having a less than 6 month old and getting stuck in the house. Um, yeah, it was an interesting time to say the least. Um, During that time as well, so I can't remember whether it was the first lockdown or second lockdown. I ended up speaking to someone about information security and different roles. I was I don't know whether it's a military thing or whether it's a tech thing or a combination, but every 2 to 3 years we get an itch and something has to change. I think it's more a military thing because every 2 to 3 years we deploy and we get we change our posts. So the normal state of things is we would go to one station, we'd do our job there for 2 to 3 years, then we'd move to another station, do a completely different job. So we're constantly on the move.
It's even more like the human psychology. So it's you start looking at the new place after 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, or 7 years. Basically, if after 1 year you look at a new place but you still get entertained in your current job or current position, then you continue and you go up to like 3 years. And then again, you hit the switch that I need to move on. So, and I would say in your case, that probably would be a combination of both, because first of all, you kind of the military thing that you'll get redeployed, reassigned like once in 3 years, plus that human factor. And then in your case, it's just much more exaggerated, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, almost getting double the twitch just to move on. So yeah, I felt I'd been in training too long. Despite only leaving the military and I guess the industry 2016, about 2000 2021, I started thinking, oh, I've been in training too long. I'm missing the industry, and I think the way we sort of explained it to my boss at the time was, I th- we don't have the experience or the use cases that would make the training relevant anymore. Um, so, and I'd had a conversation with someone who was effectively the CISO for an organization, and he said we'd kind of touched on the information security manager role about 6 months previously, and he said, I've got someone lined up for it, but I appreciate you talking about it. He then got in touch with me six months later on and said, we were about to onboard the guy, but turns out he lied about his certifications. Are you still interested?
They don't conduct any kind of due diligence with these certificates. So basically, I can write whatever I want and then send it, and I go through all the stages of an interview.
I think they've changed their process now, but some organisations will do their due diligence up front, very early on in the interview process or the recruitment process, but some won't until it's coming up to onboarding time. Um, that's life, life gets in the way. Uh, but yeah, but um, cybersecurity industry certifications, most of them can be verified. Like CISP, SSCP, for example, you can be verified as a verified member and show that you do have those certifications. So, why the applicant felt he needed to lie about it, or that he could lie about it, that raised the first issue. But the second issue was I was just on the rebound of a couple of horrendous courses that I'd been delivering to partners, and my my joy with the job, shall we say, was at rock bottom. So I think he'd caught me probably at the right time. So I made the decision then that I'd go back into industry and join Navico as an infosec manager. Um, which good and bad points from it. I was only in industry for about 10 months, probably not even a year. Mainly because in that 6 month period between when we first spoke and when he offered me the role, the Navico had actually been acquired by a small American group called Brunswick. And with that meant that they wanted to take a lot of the cybersecurity aspects in house and back over to the US. And it kind of put my role in jeopardy even before I joined, which was a little bit frustrating. I did the best I could. I was always fighting against closing the role down. I implemented application security for the mobile apps team. I built out a very robust security and education awareness training program for the next sort of few years. I had all that planned up. And with that, the phishing click rate had dropped dramatically since I started. Um, Organised a breach assessment and the remediation of that when we got through that. So it was um, it was bittersweet. I felt I'd done quite well in the role, but I was always fighting an uphill battle to keep that role open. And eventually they kind of said, you know, we might be making your role redundant. And that was the first time I'd heard the R word since leaving the military. So I went full scale panic and contacted my old boss at Trend and asked, was there still an open headcount? Luckily, because I kept in touch with a couple of the guys from the team, I knew there was the open headcount. So it was a sure thing. Um, but yeah, it was a nice safety net. It was as I say, a bittersweet time back in industry. But joining the team again felt like coming home, which was great. Um, and again, naturally slipped back into being the main platform trainer for the XDR platform and advanced threat defense and other threat based courses. And life was good. Um, there was also an initiative that I'm not sure contributed to a decision that was later made, but someone came across from Microsoft and joined Trend and announced that Microsoft do all this free training. Why don't we set up free training for customers in the Nordics? And it was a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong. It's nice seeing beautiful parts of the world. But all the cost was bared by Trend, and by most of it was back to the BUs, but there was a lot of cost on the training team. And if we look at that in a spreadsheet, doesn't look for good reading when you're trying to work out a cost benefit analysis for the training team. Um, and I think that's essentially what Trend did, and said that they're moving away from instructor led training and got rid of the European technical training team, including its leader who'd been there for 15 plus years, which was an awful time for the organisation. It came on the back of other efficiencies. There were a lot of people let go at that time. It wasn't massively publicised for obvious reasons. It's a company sheds a few hundred or almost 1,000 people in tech nowadays. Nobody bats an eyelid. Um, but I was surprised that it wasn't more publicised. So yeah, that was the second time I'd heard the redundancy word since leaving the military. Luckily, we had as a team some time. We were given um, almost our pretty much our full notice period to find another role within the company, which was almost an impossible task for the large majority of the team. One guy got lucky and stayed on for a time, but ended up leaving for a better opportunity. Um, and luckily, when during the job hunting process, there was a lot of discussion about one of Trend's preferred partners called Pingus, and they almost saw the niche that Trend was getting rid of, and being a professional services partner, they understand that customers still need that education. So they were looking to take on the trainers and the training team, and build out their own training team so that they could supply the training on Trend's behalf. And then I decided that the relationship between myself and Trend was irreparable. I couldn't work with Trend anymore. A number of factors at play, but it still sickened me. So I did start. I continued my job hunting. I didn't want I didn't want to continue working around trend, um, but at the same time, I still needed a job. So it was right place, right time, um, but maybe not right job.
If you are entering the wrong room, it's better to admit that you entered the wrong room and then go out of that room instead of staying there and trying to fit in.
So yeah, I continued my job hunting, and I was applying to both industry roles and training roles, and this role initially came up months before. I think I even saw it before you joined Pingus, and it was it was a the recruitment process was long because they withdrew the role. So they'd been through a merger and acquisition process themselves, and as part of that, they were doing some internal restructuring. So they withdrew the role and said, thanks, you're a great candidate, but we're just having to withdraw the role. The recruiter who I was speaking to was also let go, which was scary. And then another recruiter got in touch with me over the summer, I think it was, and said, okay, so we've settled down a bit now. We've finished our restructuring. We're reopening the role. Your interview was that good that the hiring manager asked for you by name to see whether you were still available, which obviously lovely to hear. And so I said yes. And it was a no brainer because I think if the role was offered to me back when it was first there, I would have taken it and probably saved myself a lot of pain with Pingus. But you know, things happen for a reason and at the right time as well. I feel so.
It, it was there to teach you something, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure what that is yet, but I'll reflect on it and we'll see. So yeah, I've been with ZeroFox as a technical trainer for the last couple of months. Onboarded onto their systems and run through some trainings already. And the culture is even better than the culture was at Trend when I initially joined. Now Trend was very family focused, employee focused when I first joined. And ZeroFox, because it's a lot smaller, I think we've only got about 750 employees. Um, so we're a lot smaller. We're even more fluid and dynamic than the Trend training team was. I mean, there's only two of us technically in the training team. So um, yeah, I'm enjoying it, and I'm excited for where the role could go.
So you did as industry recognized courses. So you had these certifications. Um, what do you think? Are they still worth right now? Because I remember at some point, let's say 10, 15, 10 years ago, the CH was like, ooh, like if you had it, like it means that you actually either did something, or first of all you had money to do it, because it was always quite an expensive course. um, but anyways, it was like at some point an achievement to the regular IT folks. But if we look right now, at least go on LinkedIn, like everybody has like 5 to 10 the industry recognized certifications. What do you think? Do they still hold that value, or not that much anymore?
I think there's different tiers of industry certifications. I think you. I've seen a lot of arguments online against even CISP, for example, and the fact that with enough study time you can pass the exam without having the relevant experience. But the difference is the awarding body won't provide the certification unless you can prove or someone can vouch for you that you have the relevant experience. I think with CEH in particular, I think, as you say, it was relevant when it first came out. I think how it's been farmed out to certain training providers and how it's been delivered, particularly on fast track providers, has diminished its efficacy. My own experience, for example, I took CHV8 and I have also taken V10. Now, version 8 was the one that I mentioned earlier about the military paid 80% of it. And it was a fast track one because I wanted to get it as quick as possible. It involved going down to London. Luckily, I stayed in St James's Barracks to save money and travelled out to the company for the training. Now, you think of a course like Certified Ethical Hacker, you think instantly of a training room with computers that you can practice on. And yeah, no, this was just a classroom with tables, and we were all sat in lines. And I, at the time, I didn't actually own a laptop. Um, so it was very weird for me that this was how the course was being delivered. And it was primarily done on a couple of slides, but on one of those paper flip charts for the breakout bits. And it was delivered by an ex Royal military policeman, and he was very much in that defense instructor. I'm going to point at you, and have you got that? If you haven't, tough, that sort of thing. And we asked about hands-on or doing the labs, and they said, "Oh, you can do that in your own time." And we are just like, "Well, hang on a minute." There's me with no laptop, but we got the big books, and I'm sure I've still got them in the loft somewhere. But that's all I did for the week. Luckily there was a pub across the road from the barracks, so I went in there to start the evening, then came back and did some studying, and it was just like, wow, this is it. And that kind of shaped my aversion to very static based training, which is why I try and do everything as dynamically as possible, even to the point of maybe interpretive dance. But so I can see why the opinion on certifications like that has diminished. I think the second time I did it, version 10 was so much better. So the guy that delivered it was an ex offensive security engineer in the military. So he had the relevant experience, he had the relevant use cases. The split between theory and practical was 50-50, which isn't the best it could be, but for a course like that, when you've got 1,700 slides to get through for the week, it's fantastic. And not only that, there were additional demonstrations that he did that went above and beyond just to show what could be possible as well. So if the course is delivered correctly with somebody with the relevant experience, then it's a fantastic course. But as I say, for the most part, for training farms, they've ruined a lot of the almost entry level certifications. And that's what I meant by the tiers. CEH now is entry level. You've got OSCP, for example, which is a lot more in depth. You've got a 24-hour assessment. You've then got to write a report on that as well. So it's a lot more real world exposure and based, rather than, right, here's a couple of books and you can get through the exam. I think the EC Council, who are behind the CEH, have kind of recognised that, and that's why they brought in the plus and added some more paths to the CEH, but it's still considered an entry level. Um, I'll flip it as well, because I think part of the issue is recruitment and not understanding the industry and not understanding the certifications. It's almost buzzword bingo when it comes to a CV. You've got to pass that AI check first. Have you got all the right buzzwords? Um, Before it might get passed to a recruiter, and then you've got to rely on that recruiter almost understanding what the industry is looking for, or what that role is looking for. And unfortunately, recruitment is just like any other sales department. So if you get a good recruiter, fantastic. If not, you're busted.
It's actually the way how it's getting delivered, and obviously who delivers that. That is always the key point, because as we learned, both we can take the same product training and one will deliver it just scrolling through slides, and that would be the worst training you probably ever had. And then someone will actually spend as less as possible on the slide deck and do the demonstrations. But my another concern was, while I was in cybersecurity industry from the technical training side, is that we often had a group of attendees. So they participate in training, and they are, the cybersecurity analysts and so on and so forth. But when you start going through that and start to more and more learn about them, you understand that they have zero technical experience. So they understand, what the pattern is, what the all these cybersecurity buzzwords. They know that and know how to look for the IOCs and all that thing. But when it comes to a plain technical literacy, it just they lack it. They're lacking it. And do you think it's just because the industry at some point got very sexy, and then it was paid well, and obviously still pays well, and then the demand for this analyst was so big that we as of like an industry started to train a short course into cybersecurity analysis, skipping the just basic IT.
I think any any course, especially if it builds into a training program, considerations need to be made for you're going to get people that aren't technical. And I think that was the beauty of CyberFirst was we understood that not everyone coming to us would be technical. If they were being taken on for a specific technical role, we had a different program for that. We had understanding your audience is always one of the harder parts of being a trainer. Virtually, if you're doing a course virtually, it's quite difficult, especially if cameras are off and they're not being particularly engaging. It's nigh on impossible. But trying to understand your audience and where they're coming from, that is where technical trainers, can excel if they understand people and they recognize the cues. I've always said on my courses, I need your cameras on for virtual courses because I need to see your eyes, because not only are they the windows to the soul, but they will let me know when your brain has taken on too much information. That's the buffer overflow attack on your brain. So I will know when to stop the training, take a break, or even mix it up. We might have just come back from lunch. That's always the worst time as a trainer. Carbs have hit or starting to hit. You're doing a topic, especially on product training where it's particularly dry anyway. Um, and you can be talking and talking, and people just won't get it, and they might start to doze off, or So you try and mix it up. Um, I had one cohort when I was with QA, and we were talking about networking, and we were talking about TCP flow, so error flow and sequencing and all the rest of it. And it was Wednesday or maybe Thursday, so it was towards the end of the course. It had been a long week for all of us, and they just weren't getting it. And I thought, we've done demos. I've got them up. I've got them moving. We just need a change of scenery. So what I did was I said, right, field trip. We'll go out of the classroom. We went to the pub, and we each got a drink. And I explained flow control using pints. And we were pushing the pints up and down the bar and explaining it, right. So you've got this packet. You want to take this to, you're sending this to your colleague over here. What's the process? Walked across, walked back, and did the handshake and all the rest of it. So, and that helped, but it was right for that situation. And I think realizing that not everybody has the fundamentals is key for training, because I've met so many trainers that ignore the fundamentals because there's an assumption of knowledge. Now, you should never assume. Um, I generally say I try and teach most of my courses like I'm teaching my mum. She has no technical ability, and she'll be the first to admit it. So I'm quite happy announcing that. I try to get the fundamentals across. If people get it and realize, I then quickly realize, they've got it, they understand the fundamentals, that's great. If they don't, I'm happy enough in my own ability to break out, go on the whiteboard, whatever, do something different to explain the fundamentals. And the amount of time, you probably had it as well with your trend deliveries, the amount of time we're talking about a particular product, and there's a lot of crossover between the products, and we're talking about a topic, maybe something like connected threat defense, and they don't get it. And you're thinking, A, why? But then you're thinking, okay, would you like me to explain it? Just because that takes 5 minutes. And if you can make somebody's day or give them that light bulb moment just by using 5 minutes of your time, then you pretty much a happy trainer.
That's true. That's true. So it just in case of training, we need to kind of think always on the how we approach attendees, and probably we always supposed to assume the zero knowledge instead of assuming that there is a full understanding of some basics when it comes to that.
The only assumption that I've taken to trainings is that none of the attendees have done any prerequisites.
Well, speaking of cybersecurity, considering how many regular people are falling into to being a victim of a scam, and how, let's say, so we have a tax authority, and I received like 5 or 6 times an email from tax authority, right? And it was crafted that if I would be drunk, or if me wouldn't be me, I would fall into that. Because, like, email clients now, they're hiding the email, they're just showing the name, the pretty name, and then the rest thing was there, the address, the logo, the template is the same. I've compared these two, and it was like a very small bit that you could actually understand, but you need to be trained to spot them. So yeah. So what do you think, what are the biggest challenges when it comes to this cybersecurity right now? What the biggest challenge slash threat?
I think the biggest challenge is getting people on board, and that has always been a big challenge. And whether that is part of getting people to understand what the threat is, or whether it's getting people on board, as in executives, getting those on board with understanding security enough to throw some more money at it. Um, it that's always been the biggest part. But ironically, the weakest part of any security system is typically us. Not us, we're amazing, but the average person won't know to dissect an email and check the source and check whether there's any beacons in it. We will. So the hardest part is getting that buy-in from the higher ups, but also pitching training, and going back to our previous point, pitching training at a level that is suitable for everyone. Tailoring it so that the people that aren't as confident on spotting spam emails, um, to understand what is different between them. There's a lot of arguments about phishing tests. Now, I I think they are a good idea, but they have to be implemented properly. And I think as part of the implementation, there needs to be correct follow up. So not just right, you've been sent this email, you've clicked on the link, you've put your credentials in, now you're going to be fired. I don't mean that kind of follow up. I mean, right, so you've clicked on this. In this case, it's not the end of the world, but this is what you need to be looking for. So adding that extra step of education to say, right, we're now going to have like a security drop-in session. This was the phishing email. Here's the results. You could, turn it into a competitive edge. Say this department beat this department this time. And all the rest of it. But break the email out, and just say, look, this is what looks funny about it. We were always taught in the military for patrols, and it holds true for cybersecurity. Often, you are looking for the presence of the abnormal or the absence of the normal. And if or two of those are tweaking your spidey senses, then something is wrong. So if there should be something in an email that you're expecting but isn't, or there's something in an email that you're not expecting, and the old adage generally is true that if it sounds too good to be true, it is, then, flag it up. No one's going to tell you off. No one's going to discipline you for flagging emails. If you're following the security process that should be in place, pressing the alert button or sending it to a 911, for example, flag that email. No one's going to go, you've been flagging too many false emails. You're following the process. It's a good thing. And getting that across to people is extremely hard. But also then getting the buy-in from stakeholders, executives, etc., is doubly hard. You're also reliant on. I love triangles in security, and people, processes, and technology, and trying to secure all of those in an adequate way is very difficult. Having almost a central point in that triangle, and trying to get that happy medium is very near impossible. But having a multi-layered approach at each point as well is essential. So having multiple security products. One of my interviews, I was asked, if during a course of an investigation you identify that an executive has downloaded some illicit material onto his company phone, what do you do? And there's two ways you can think about it. You can go down the blame route and say, right, he's at fault. He shouldn't have done that on his company mobile. He needs to be prosecuted. You can also go down the route of the security blame and say, well, hang on a minute. We've got controls. Why was he able to access that illicit material to then be able to download it? If you're thinking the HR route, has he got an issue? Do we need to put him through therapy? We need to make sure our security controls are more robust. So the the biggest threat as a follow up to that, I would say, is misinformation. And there is so much of it out there because the internet and the web is so much in your face now.
Very spot on, right? So the misinformation or lack of knowledge. Um, but another thing that I often hear about, people rooting against the cybersecurity controls or anything related to security because it's not convenient, right? So, and for example, the CEO or CFO or whoever, the co-founder, co-owner, you name it, but the high bird in the big bird in a company, he always says like, first of all, it's my company. But the second thing is that I don't have personal laptop and work laptop. That's the same for me, right? The same as and you and I was always fighting with that. I was always telling like, wait a second. Again, I said like it doesn't matter how do you think about it, but I just want to say that your laptop, being at the C-suite level, your laptop is pretty much a target, right? And if you keep your private photos there, your private stuff, your other business stuff there, and this business, anyone targeting this business will get much more from that. Or if we implement security controls, they always say like, no, I need a pen drive access, and all that stuff. So they kind of they're sabotaging the cybersecurity from top. And while the regular employees might not be as targeted as these guys are the ones who will get compromised the most. How we should soften these inconveniences?
So when I first joined Navico as the infosec manager, my view was very much security first, and it was a very hard line decision making process that I had. Um, Weirdly, I found less blowback from executives. I found more blowback from developers because, like you say, they're coding all day. They need access to various repositories. They need remote access to their devices. They might want to take their code home with them for so having pen drives, like you said. Um, I I, I'll go back to what I said about getting buy-in. You need to ensure you get the leadership team to be exactly that. They need to be leaders, and they can't be seen to circumvent any of the rules. If the processes are put in place and agreed by the leadership need to be undertaking those processes as well. If they don't, like in your example, then what's to stop a younger employee or mid-range manager going, you know what, the CEO's doing it, I want to do it as well. I need a pen drive, and then it snowballs. And a lot of security is based on trust. We trust cloud repositories, and we further enhance that trust through the use of authentication and personal access tokens and the rest of it. When it comes to processes, if we see anyone else going bypassing them, then we're just going to go, you know what, that process isn't fit for purpose. And it takes an alert and aware security manager to go, you know what, this process isn't working. And that could be as a result of seeing what is going on. It could be a result of a breach assessment or a tabletop assessment and say, what happens if we follow this process? And then process and policy building is a cyclical process. We had a 4-step process in the military called the deeming cycle, and it was plan, do, check, review, and that's essentially how I've approached most like policy writing, and you, it works well for the instant response process as well. But essentially, you're continually testing your own policies, your own processes to make sure that they are fit for purpose. If they're not, you review them, you modify them, check them again, continually checking. Um, so having that in place and having a security manager and preferably a security team in place. But again, not every organization has the budget, the personnel, the capability, or the appetite for it. You know, every organization's risk appetite and risk towards cybersecurity is going to be different. And if you're a startup, you might be more aggressive and say, you know what, we're just starting, our footprint is quite small. Nobody knows about us yet. No one's going to target us. We're going to be a little bit more lax on the cybersecurity side. Or the startup might be going, you know what, we're dealing in digital currency. It's a hot topic at the moment. It's likely to be a target, so we're going to invest quite heavily on the security side. So it is organisation and leadership dependent, but I would definitely say it it can be quite tough. And often the security manager will be towing the line between security and functionality, getting specific use cases in potentially, but as long as they've got the process in place to say, right, we've got this robust process, we've got this particular use case, we're following the letter of this robust process. Maybe we'll add an appendix to it just to say for this particular use case, we can allow certain roles.
You've mentioned like if we are a startup or we are a company, so what are threats? The and what are the our outside threats? So the external threats. What do you think, from your perspective, what would be like a top three external threats to an organization or individual?
I think the top threat is always going to be a nation or state sponsored attacker. If they're targeting an organization, they are going to get in. You know, we've operated on assumed breach for a long time now, and um, there's a lovely equation when you're talking about attackers. If an attacker has the capability, they have the motivation, and they have the time, they're going to breach you. If you are their target, they will get in. And it's nice in a way that for almost probably at least the last 5 years, companies are coming round to that way of thinking that we need to assume we are going to get breached at some point. So now we need to have the processes in place. Now we have to have the technology in place. We need to train our personnel. So I would always put nation state sponsored attackers, APTs, um, at the top of the list because in a lot of cases, they don't care. They genuinely don't care who their target is. If they want information, they want to cripple infrastructure, they will do it. Um, I think second on the list, you're almost looking at maybe not nation state sponsored APTs, but criminal groups. Um, there's always been a reference to crime and cybercrime and whether crime has been enabled by the internet, so cyber enabled crimes, or whether the crime itself is dependent on the cyber functionality. So, can that crime only be committed through the technology? So, denial of service, for example. Um, you could argue that you could cut the power cable to an organization, or cut the undersea cables to take a country off the internet. Um, that's still very dependent on the technology. So I would argue that APTs definitely, whether they're nation state sponsored or cyber criminals. Script kiddies, yeah, I often say it's never been easier to be a hacker. at the moment because there are so many write ups, there are so many tools and cyber ranges to practice. And, part of it is to help in the job role, part of it is to help with certifications. Um, Other times it's just a hobby, curiosity. Um, but it's never been easier because a lot of the time the tools that are out there are very user friendly, very easy to use. And there are enough write ups and enough YouTube videos on how you can run those tools. So it's never been easier to be a hacker. Um, that said, you still need to understand vaguely what you're doing because, as you say, the companions, the AI generated code isn't necessarily going to work. And if you can't pick through that code and understand why it didn't work, then you're going to stumble. Um, at the same time, ignorance is no excuse. If you have used a companion and found some code and performed a denial of service attack against a hospital, which has prevented them from performing their duties and their surgeries and all the rest of it, and you are found liable, in the UK, you've got the Computer Misuse Act, and you can't say, well, I asked this AI assistant to help me. You have actually run the attack. The AI assistant won't do that for you yet. They might do in the future, but um, wait till Metasploit gets a AI AI assistant. But so script kiddies, and you could almost lump them in with the inside threats as well. Attackers are only as good as the information that they have. External cybersecurity is, you know, for the most part, protected and looked for. And as long as an organization has a strong, multi-layered approach to keeping adversaries out, then an attacker is unlikely to go in through the front door. So they then rely on the people on the inside through fishing, farming, etc. Or, worst case scenario, what's to stop someone putting an attacker through the recruitment process and getting them on the inside? So I think in terms of top three that I would concern myself about this year, APTs, always. Script kiddies or curiosity kittens. Um, and I think, given the start of the year, natural disasters would have to be third. Anything happens to the internet, yes, there is some resilience redundancy in there, but it's definitely one part of the risk matrix that every security manager worries about.
Yeah, and there is no protection against that almost. Well, and also we can, yeah, when Metasploit is going to get the AI, and Metasploit is not going to need a person to operate that, then we go the whole Skynet thing. So that's cool. What do you think? What happened with hacktivism?
I think it's partially a change in security controls. It's a bit harder now to actively change a website. Yes, you can do it in developer mode and change it locally, and then maybe take a screenshot and say, "Look, I hacked this site." But you know, most people know that you can change something locally in a browser. So I think part of it is the the development of security controls and the multi-layered approach to it. I think part of it is social media. You can have the same impact as defacing a website on social media now. And if you've got enough followers, or even get someone with millions of followers to like or repost whatever you've said, it doesn't take much now for something to be viral. So I think social media has almost helped with hacktivism becoming less and less.
Meta and Zuck did a good favor to us. to some extent.
Yeah. 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 Not really. I think that there's a massive problem with social media. I think with a lot of things in tech, it started with good intentions, and I think the good intention was we're going to bring people together. Um, Problem is, as a race, we are very nosy anyway. We're a very curious race. We love to discover things, and we love to find out what other people are doing. The problem with that is we're also a very sensitive race. We are very impressionable, and whether we admit it or not, everything is a competition, and we will get jealous. We see someone with a better car, a better job, what appears to be a better life. We're going to get jealous of that and maybe try a knee jerk reaction and change something. And what a lot of people forget about social media is it's a facade. Just like we have one personality when we're at home, we have one personality when we're alone, we have one personality at work. We put on these facades, these masks, and we almost become different people. And what a lot of people have enjoyed about social media is not only have you got a facade, you've got that impersonal nature of the internet. You know, millions of strangers, billions of strangers are on a social network, and you can be whoever you want to be. And that plays into our need to be liked and receive those likes. And I mean, I personally, I'm not on social media. Um, it has been detrimental at times in my life, and I feel better for not being on it. Feel more present and more aware when I'm with people, and I'm also not hunting likes or those notifications. I'm not chasing. I remember when Facebook first started. One of the things that was the competition was how many friends could you get. Um, so I do get it because I've lived it, but at the same time, I I stay off it. Um, and if I'm honest, it hasn't been difficult to stay off it. I don't feel out of the loop. Partially because my wife's on it and she tells me everything, so it's fine. But no, I get the appeal of it, but at the same time, I think people are coming around to the fact that they're realizing that social media is rather it's good rather than great, and it's also free because they're the data. So
If you're not paying for the product, then you are the product. You need to pick a different country tomorrow where you will move uh, permanently or for at least like 5 to 10 years. What would be your top 5 countries where you would live if it's not UK?
from my travels, I mean, I definitely wouldn't move my family to Iraq or Afghanistan. Um, I would probably say I'm not going to put them in order because I don't know enough about each of the country to sort of justify it. I'm just going on how I felt when I've traveled to countries. Yeah. Um, so I think for ease, because I know my wife is very much a home bird. She loves her family and very close to her family. So probably the Netherlands. Um, their English is probably better than ours as well, so it'd be a good thing for the kids. Um, Norway was beautiful. when I went up to Alishand for customer training. It was just really beautiful. It is quite north, and I'm not sure how we'd feel about having the sun for most of the day at times, but yeah, it's definitely a beautiful part of the world. Um, I'm tempted to say Canada, partially because you know it's part of the old empire, and but I'm tempted to say that because again, it's a beautiful part of the world, but just whether the family would cope with being that side of the globe and the weather. Um, most of my family feels very cold, so probably not the best choice. So on the flip side of that, probably Australia, um, English speaking country. Um, mo- we all absolutely love Bluey, the cartoon. So whether we do East Coast or whether we stay more Southwest, I don't know, but yeah, that's one thing the kids have asked for. At one stage, they want to go and see Bluey's house. I've yet to break it to them that Bluey's is a cartoon. And I think the last one, and I think just for ease, rather than anything else, in fact, no, I was going to say America, but I can't. I can't say. I don't want. I wouldn't want my kids growing up in America. I wouldn't want the hassle of healthcare out there, along with the other physical threats. So, as easy as it would be, with the language and all the rest of it, I couldn't do it. So, I'm gonna I'm gonna go with where else did I like Switzerland.
Okay. Any hobbies that you have outside of cybersecurity and tech?
I mean, despite having two young kids and very little time, I do try and have some hobbies. So I play field hockey. I have done for most of my life, probably since I was at college. Took a little bit of a break once the kids were a little younger, but getting back into it this season, so that's quite nice. Trying to drop some of the pounds that I've picked up since COVID. I play a little bit of piano. There is a digital keyboard in the office with me, so tinkle on that occasionally. My main one is being a sound technician. So I'm a sound technician for a couple of amateur dramatic groups, one adult and one youth theatre that's nearby. So that's a lot of fun and quite involved. So enjoy that.
Cool. So you keep yourself occupied.
Try, or Has been one of my mantras since leaving QA is yes, you can live and breathe it, but you need that balance. You need that time away. Otherwise, you will achieve burnout, which on the list of achievements of life achievements is not the best one to receive. So
Okay, we've invented a time machine right now, and you go back 20 years ago. You meet yourself, obviously. You see little Sean, and um, any life advices, career advices you would give to yourself, uh, considering that your current experience. And in that case, I would like to say that it doesn't mean that it would be a butterfly effect. So consider this as the parallel universe. So whatever the that Sean is going to do, it's not going to affect you when you get back. You're still going to have your kids, wife, career, and so on and so forth.
yeah, I mean, I think the obvious one is buy Bitcoin. I I think I'm quite a reflective person anyway, and I think if I was to go back, I would encourage myself to stay motivated, especially during early studies, and also I'd encourage myself to open up more. Um, over the last few years, mental health has been a big topic, and even more surprisingly so in men. And I think because of how I was raised and my situations, I didn't ask for help. I didn't open up. So I think my main advice would be talk. Talk to people. It's okay to be just okay. If you're not okay, speak up. Um, Other than that, I would say yeah, definitely buy Bitcoin. Keep keep doing sport. Keep flexible because I'm on the wrong side of 40 now, and you get some weird aches and pains. So try and be. I think if I hadn't done so much physical activities in the military when I was younger, I'd probably be a lot more in pain at the moment. So I'm thankful for that. Perversely, um, but also don't worry so much. Like you don't realize it at the time, but life is short, and as much as we want to progress in life and get promotions and find the right partner and settle down and get to those perceived life milestones, slow down, enjoy it. you know it's not until you have kids that you talk to and you have weird conversations about random topics that you realize that I'm not always going to be here for this. And that's when mortality hits, or real mortality hits. And you then start thinking, how can I extend this? How can I make life longer? Um, so I guess my points on advice would be buy Bitcoin, be kinder to yourself, and start researching eternal life.
So that would be car versus train or tube.
Car.
PowerPoint versus Google Slides.
Oh, see, if you'd asked me 3 months ago, it would have been PowerPoint all day. I've started getting into Google Slides. There's not too much difference between them that I've seen, so I'll leave it as both.
A messenger app, I don't know, Signal, WhatsApp, Telegram, whatever, you name it, versus iMessenger.
A messaging app will take Signal, and that's only because the end-to-end encryption is better. And from when I last saw Apple's white paper on it, Apple still controls the public keys for their iMessage. So in theory, Apple could be the attacker in the middle and read all the messages. In theory,
You are invited to be a part of one of the teams, and you need to pick a red team or blue team.
red. It's a lot more fun, and if you are doing a structured red team engagement, you are in control of that scope and control of that structure. If you're a blue team and you're defending, you're at the mercy of the attacker. And blue team will often have to deal with more unsocial hours.
Okay. On premises versus public cloud.
Oh, I like how you said public cloud. Personally, on prem, but that's my control issues.
Thanks for attending. It was a pleasure, and again, it's always nice to see you at least that way.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Okay, Shaun. So all the best to you, and happy Friday. And yeah, talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye bye.